Hello, my name's Richard and today I'm going to show you how to... Hello, my name's Richard and today I'm going to show you how I sharpen a chisel. Alright.
Not really. No.
Every day starts the same. I'm just waiting for the kettle to boil. You know you just filmed a bloody kettle boiling, don't you? And once it's done, I stand at my bench, and in this current workshop, and that means I look straight out this window, and it's I'm staring this great big brick wall. And all I'm telling myself, you gotta think I can't even remember my own name at this point. I'm just telling myself, don't sit down in that lovely pink chair, because you know you're gonna ruin the day. Now, I'm about as cronky as my old car, at this time of the morning. So, we both need a bit of a technique. With my car, I just park it pointing downhill and give it a bit of a rolling start. And I need that myself. So, rather than having to think too much, I have this same job, regardless of what I've got planned for the day, that I always do. And I do it because it's brain dead. And all that is a tart with my sharpening stones up. Now, you see, I get all the crud and gruel off from the day before. The day before I'd have sharpened a lot. I always do. I sharpen a tremendous amount. It's just in the nature of the work. So I always find it nice. It's a good feeling, when your stones are clean and flat and all ready to go for the day. And once that's done, what I do is I just sort of scarper around my bench, and I just sort of grab any sort of edge tool that I think I might need, in that sort of first session of the day. Chisels, plane irons, and I touch them all up. I get them all sharpened, so they're all ready. I'm doing this while my tea's cooling. Once you've done it, you can remember your name again, and you feel yourself switching on. I've done this for as long as I can remember. It's it is part of my routine, and I think that really is the best way to describe, I think, my sharpening method, and that is it's routine. It's done so many times through the day that it has to be. I can't have anything that gets in its way. I don't ever want to have to think before I sharpen. It's just got to be procedure and back to work. So anyway, what's this video? What I want to do is I just want to build some sort of more fundamental videos, and I'm going to have to touch sharpening. I've been putting it off. I always feel like unless you've got some bloody ground shaking to say, don't just add to the confusion. And sharpening creates a lot of bloody riff-raff. There's a lot of confusion around it. So I've never wanted to really add any to that. So it's going to be a pretty simple video. I don't want to break it down too much just yet. I want to, just to see the fundamentals, and then you can ask away, and then I know where to focus. I can refine my answers a little bit more. So what we'll do is I'll finish my tea, and I'll set it up on the bench, so you can see, and I'll sharpen in real time. I'll just show you the process. I'll just talk you through it, and then we'll go through it a bit slower, what's actually happening, and why I'm doing it. But once we've done all that, I'll have another chat with you, and we'll I'll tell you why I actually think my method's pretty shite. It's not. I don't think it's probably the best method for most people. It's shite. Well, that took me a bit too long to get off my chair. I knew it would. Right then, so what I've done is I've dragged all my shite over here. So, now normally, you know, I was just sharpening over there. I always have my sharpening stuff off the bench. You know, unless I absolutely have to, like, you know, I ain't sharpening on my bench. And there's multiple reasons. First is obviously you get a lot of shite everywhere, you know, the oil and all that, and it gets in your work. You know, it always does. And the other thing is you know, you're in the heat at the moment, right, and you're pounding through your work. The last thing you want to do is tidy up your bench to put your sharpening stuff on it. So have a dedicated spot, you know, within a sort of step away from the bench. That's the first thing that you know, I'd recommend you do. So what I've got is I've got a great big bloody diamond plate. And this is well overkill. You know, I have to get it's quite expensive. You don't need one of these, but really you just want the coarsest, you know, highest quality diamond plate you can afford is a good place to start, and that's your roughing plate. And I've just got like a sort of plain old Jane oil stone. This is an older one. I do find the newer ones are they feel a little coarser than these older ones. I don't know why. You know, I think this is still an Norton, but it's just an old one. I've got a good stock of them, but the new ones are fine. You just it's just worth noting that. And then I've got my strop. Now my strop's a bit of bloody leather. It's quite thick, a bit squidgy, and a lot of people don't like that. But you'll see why I don't mind it soon. And that's got bloody pretty much every grit of compound that's in existence on it, because it's fairly irrelevant, really. You know, as long as it polishes, it works, and that's all you need to worry about. So what I'll do is I'm going to just go through this in real time so you can see the pace, and then we'll break it down. So currently it's still a bit ganked up the stone just from this morning sharpened. So I'll just show you what I was doing there, because you know, it's fairly simple, but I just put a bit of, what else have I got? I'll do it. So that's window cleaner. I normally use a bit of white spirit, something like that. Anything will do. And you'll see what I'll do to my bench now. And I'm just going to rub that on the plate, and it just kind of re-establishes it. So get some rags. So oil stones, they wear, you know, they wear so slow compared to things like water stones and that. But you know, you put, you know, a couple of dozen sharpens on it, like, and you know, it's worth touching them up. I also just like to get all the grime out the grit. Just refreshes it. Right, so I will bring you closer shortly, so just bear with. Right, I'll do. So just a run-of-the-mill chisel. So SERP's a window cleaner on your diamond stone, and all I'm going to do now is just put a roughing bevel in. So just getting the metal out of the way. So that's just all I do with this. Rub it back and forth. Natural arc of my arm. A few seconds. As soon as I can feel a burr, job's a good one. WD-40, that's the best sharpening fluid for oil stones you'll buy. All this bloody posh stuff, it's no different. Now I'm going to do is the same thing, but I'm just going to lift it up a bit more. So I'm only doing this on the tip. And it needs a few. Re-establish the back. I'm not just removing the burr here, I'm actually flattening the back off a little bit more because of the way the strop deals with it. And I'll tickle it a bit more and go again. Job's a good one. And then it's just strop. Now I'm sitting this slightly, ever so slightly higher than what I just did on the oil stone. And depending on how refined you want that edge, depends on how many times you're going to pull it. So sometimes, well, for the majority of the times, this is general purpose. I'll just kiss it like, and then I press it firmly down. This is general purpose, more on that in a minute. And you just pull it back. So, nothing ground shaking. Just needs a few, and then you go again. I'll just repeat that a few times. And that's basically it. So, if I need just a general purpose sharpen, you know, run of the mill, that's all I do. And I've got that down to about 30 seconds. So, no faff. Now, what I'll do now is we'll break this down a little bit more so you can get the gist and see if it can work out for you. Okay. Right, so what we've got here is a bit of an artist's impression, like, so you're going to have to use your imagination. It's looking very much like something you find in a cave or something, but what it is, I've got 3 different profiles here, and what this represents, each one of these, is a chisel from the side. You know, so that's the bottom, that's the top, that's your bevel. 3 times. So these represent the your options when it comes to your roughing bevel, or I think it's more commonly known as a primary bevel. What that is it's really it's just a hacked out angle that is just getting rid of material, so that then we can work on the tip. So normally what you'll hear is that this will be done at something like 25 degrees. So this angle here is 25 degrees, somewhere around there. That's a guide. You know, don't follow that too accurately. It doesn't need to be accurate, but it certainly doesn't want to really be any steeper than that. Now, this first option is unless you're bloody Japanese or using a guide, to get your primary bevel to just be straight, you know, you're not getting that by hand, you know, and like I say, unless you're using a very different method. So we will generally be ignoring that one because it's, you know, its characteristics aren't important to what we're doing at the minute. But as you can see, that is just a straight angle, it's just a wedge. Kind of sits as best of both worlds, I suppose, you could argue. But you're going to need a guide, particularly on thin irons and thin chisels, things like that. This second one, this is the most common. You'll see this everywhere. This is, without question, the most common way to sharpen this day and age. And that is what's called a hollow grind. This is a concaved bevel. So it's curved. The reason it's curved is because that is put on with a grinder, like a mechanised grinder. So the extent of that curve is really governed by the diameter of the wheel. Great big wheel, like, you'll barely notice it. If you've got a piddly little 4-inch wheel, you're going to have quite a prominent curve. And then we've got really exaggerated, all of these are, is sort of closer to the method that we're going to be talking about, which is the sort of the bulging bevel, the convex bevel. And this curve here is created because we're just freehand sharpening. And rather than trying to hold your arm at this weird angle and be rigid, we just kind of let your arm do the work. And that naturally creates an arc. Of course, it looks nothing like that. It's much shallower. So, something that is worth noting, and that is that if you was, let's just say, to do all of these at 25 degrees, this is true, because the lines are straight. This one, if you go from point to point, the first half of the bevel is actually less than 25 degrees. So this actually has advantage and disadvantage, but the advantage of this profile is that it does have good like penetrative power. Like it chops in deep before it bottoms out. Here, where we are, this is your first issue. If you went 25 degrees point to point, your first portion of your bevel is much steeper. And this goes hand in hand with the biggest issue we're doing bevels like this, and that is that just through being lazy, you're trying to find speed, you can find yourself every time you re-put this bevel in that you're not working it all the way to the top. You're working towards the bottom, so you get steeper and steeper and steeper before you know it. Like the tool's now used as an ornament, and then you've got a right old ball ache bringing it all back into where it should be. So what I'd like you to kind of do if you're going to do this is just throw that 25 degrees out the window, and instead put your bevel in, your grinding bevel, your roughing bevel, whatever you want to bloody call it, as low as you can. Lower the better, as low as you practically can. Don't go out your way to go stupid. But this gives you some room to catch yourself if you notice it starting to steepen on you. It kind of just sets the tone in your head as well that this is to be low. And it also negates the issue of the first portion of this bevel being steep. So we can bring in the characteristics much more into favour with this one. So, right now what I'm doing is I'm sounding like this is shite, and this is the way to go. But it's actually, in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, it's not. Not for the sort of types of tools I use anyway. And the main reason for me is durability. This don't get spoken about half as much as it should do, in my opinion. Sharpening isn't just about sharp. You've got to have a sharp edge, but it gets to a point where there's no point in going any sharper. It gets to a point where it's working, and you can gain a little bit of durability through going to a more refined edge, but it does get to a point where you're starting to lose benefit. But this, just by its own nature, it is much tougher. It's a much tougher edge, and it also doesn't wedge. And you think about this, that's more like a bullet. This is like a door wedge. You go mortising with this, your chisel just gets stuck. It's always wedging. This doesn't. The slightest bit of side pressure on it and it'll pop right back out. So that's why I like this, is it gives me tremendous durability without also without wedging and things like that. Alright, so I've turned the stone around a bit so you can see a bit better. So what I'm going to do is just go through that bevel again and come up with anything I can en route. So, like I say, this thing, it wants to be as low as you can. So really, if you're holding your chisel like that, you can do this one-handed. Normally that's what I do. You've got a spare hand for a reward. But as you come back, that's the high point, obviously, and then you push forward and it naturally lowers the chisel. So when I stand up, high, the lowest portion. And that's all you're doing. Just that arc, just let your arm flop, just flop on it. And that's all you got to do. And you'll find roughly how low to take your hand. And you can just keep going. The lower you go, like, you can't hurt it by going too low. It's not going to happen. So if I just cover that, the Sharpie. Oh, if that thing's going to even bloody... Come on, you scoundrel. We can't even see that, but it's black. Just pretend it's black. And that's a good way to really check you're getting the whole bevel. And what you'll do in time is you'll actually, it's very subtle, but you'll hear it. Like you can hear when you've covered the entire bevel this end and you're ringing on the cutting edge, and you can hear when it sort of picks the back of the chisel up like. But that's taken already that entire Sharpie mark out, you know, just those few strokes. So once you've sort of started to optimize your angles, this gets quicker and quicker and quicker because you're removing less material. It's when you're changing the angle every time that you're going to start finding this a slog. Now, something else you've got to bear in mind with this is that a lot of people struggle with this, and that is keeping the edge square, stopping this edge going on the kink like. And the way I deal with that is I don't think any of my tools are actually truly square. But every time I go to the stone, en route, that one step, you just swipe a little look at that edge, and you can see quite quickly which way it's leaning. So when I come then to the stone on this grinding bevel, on this roughing bevel, I just put a bit more pressure that side. So you're forever chasing your tail, but that's the point. So you just you keep on top of it rather than trying to perfect it. And that's the best attack there really with it. But when we're doing this, all we're doing is rubbing it about, and rub your finger along the back off the edge. And if you feel like a little curling of metal, that's called the burr. That's what it is when people say find the burr. So you can feel that, I can feel that. So that's it, the job's a good one. So now what we want to do is move on to refining that. And that's where the oil stone comes in. Right, so we're on to the refining. Now, I think the first thing to do at this stage, and that is really, we should remove that burr, because you've lost now. If you keep that there, you can't actually tell if you've actually sharpened correctly. So get your oil on the stone, and then just put the back down. You kind of lay it like that first, and then bring it into contact. Don't come at it that way, you'll ruin your edge. Just drop it down, roll it back and forward. And then pop it off the same way as it went on. And what that's done is that will have taken any burr off that back when you feel it. So now it just runs true straight off the edge. So what we want to do now is we want to tickle that tip, and we want to do it as minimal as possible. You know, the more we work it, the bigger that little secondary bevel becomes now, the more work we have to do on the coarse stone on the next sharpening to remove it. So the more precise you get here, you know, the faster the whole process starts to become. And this is also the first stage where we can start thinking, right, you know, what's this chisel getting used for? Because if it's just general purpose, like what I'll do, which we'll do here, is I'm only going to sharpen that tip slightly steeper than what's currently there. And, you know, you've got all this possibility now where you can keep going steeper, and the steeper you go, the more durable that will technically be. So if this was going to be used now for a mortise, you know, I'd actually come up much steeper and really strengthen that edge. And that's the wonderful thing about this system, is that, you know, this tool doesn't have to be a dedicated mortise chisel after that, because on the next sharpen, all that gets reset. You know, and then you're starting from the same reset point every time, so you can constantly alter what the tool's being used for. So if you were starting this like early on and you're not sure where the angle is, what I recommend you do is actually copy the bevel that you just put on. So rud it more on the heel. So I'm actually completely on the heel. I'll bring you in again in a minute. And I'm gradually raising the handle. And you'll feel a slight change when you get to that tip. Just give it a few once you're there and feel for the burr. Once you've got it, just flip it onto its back. Remove it. Now that's technically ready now for the strop, but I often go back, but don't do this if you're starting, because you're going to start introducing new angles. But once you've got quite precise, you just come back and I do some real light, just a few, and then I do a few light on the back. And what you're doing there is you're just artificially kind of raising the grit in the stone. You're making it a little finer. You're not cutting as deep. Now, we've technically got a sharp edge now. You know, it's ready to go. But, what I want to do then is move to the strop, and that's where a lot of magic happens on a strop. I think people who don't strop are missing out. I really like stropping. It's more than just a cheap, fine stone. It's you know, you can do an awful lot with a strop, and we'll go through that now. And finally the strop. Now, like I said, this has got quite a soft pad on it. It's what you find is that it tends to contour around the tool, which I quite like, because I like rounds when I sharpen. I don't want true straight flats. I know a lot of people like it, but it's the rounds where the durability is at, and that's what a softer strop will give you. So what this has got on it is see what I've got kicking about. There's something there. And where's that other stuff? Can't remember what it's called. But I think that's got on it some of that like green block compound on it. That's stuffed real fine. So depending on how coarse the oil stone is you're coming off, I do think for hand stropping that green stuff is probably a little too fine. You know, you could actually have two strops. You could have a step up one where it goes real fine if you're needing that sort of refinement. But what I actually quite like is that, what's it bloody called? You polish like chrome with it. It's like auto sol or something like that. And I know a lot of the knife sharpeners, they love that stuff. I don't know what it is, it seems to cut like bloody lightning. But something like that is a great place to start, because as long as it's polishing, it's doing the job. And if it can cut quicker, because it's a little bit coarser, you know, that's less repetitions on the strop. It's less times for you to mess it up. So, you know, if you're learning to sharpen, don't try going to stupidly fine grits, because you're only actually hindering yourself. You know, you're not gonna get the benefit of them. So this is an amalgamation of all sorts of bloody anything I've had to hand. It's its own unique grit. So thing is with the strop as well to remember is you pull. You know, don't ever push the chisel into it, you just cut it. And you're always pulling and lifting, like a paddle, just slap on it. And what we're going to do is, again, if you're not sure on your angle, you can start on that full bevel, not even come into contact with the cutting tip, so the bevel's down, and then just gradually lift it until you'll actually see down the edge of it, when you're above it looking, you'll see little flecks of the burr pulling over, and that's when you know your right angle. And then you just maintain that. Like I say, within reason, the more you do, the more refined it's going to get. So you're just going to keep doing that until you feel it. You'll actually almost feel its resistance slightly different as well on the strop as it's polishing itself up. So I'll run that through a bit. Narrow with a chisel as well, it happens a lot quicker. Wider tools take longer. Let's get that off. That'll do. So it's a mirror already. By the time you're finished, it'll actually look like one bevel. And it'll be slightly coarser at the top, and it'll gradually get more polished towards the bottom. But all those planes you've created, they'll merge. And that's kind of what you're after. But again, how high I come depends on how much durability versus slicing action do I want. So that's pretty good for general purpose. Alright, now the back. So what we've got to do now is polish this back in. And you know, a lot of folk, if you're sharpening on like Japanese waterstones, things like that, the back, you know, apparently it'll never ever touch anything other than the finest stone once it's been prepped. As well as you've seen, I've just run the back of my chisel on a gnarly old oil stone. So, you know, what am I going to do about that? Well, that's why I like a soft strop, because I can apply pressure now down. My back's true because it's been on the stone. And as I pull it back, at a slight angle, the strop material will like contour around that cutting edge, and it will put most of its cutting action within that area. So it'll polish that area quite quickly where it matters, and sort of glaze over the rest. And this is, you know, it's not detectable in normal working conditions at all. It always means that your chisel gets a reset on each sharpen. So I'll do that a few times. What I'm doing is I'm dropping it on like I did on the stone, where the edge is up, and then press it firm, pull it, come off the same way. I've got my finger over the bevel, so I've got some good downwards force there. And you may see some tiny little flecks of light of a burr remnant flicking back up. Now, when you see that, I mean, just come over the other way again. Just knock off a few more pulls. Repeat. You kind of like, I don't know, let's just say you did 10, 12 pulls to start with, and you're going to go on the back and do the same. And then you might reverse it and do 5, and then 5, and you just sort of break it down to you sort of pretty much do a single and a single. And that's it. You've got a chisel that won't have any issue slicing your hairs off your arms, and I know that's not, a lot of people say, oh, that's not truly sharp. It doesn't need to slice atoms, you know. That'll live up to any edge test that anyone would want to do, and it will last, you know, and that's just as important. You know, you can get you could sharpen a chisel up, you know, to really optimize for one of those weird chisel bloody sharpness test machines that everyone's got at the minute. But when that comes to actual chopping a joint out, like it makes no odds. Like it'll probably just crumble. It's not. It doesn't mean anything in practical terms. durability and sharpness, you've got to find that balance for its application. And so that's what I like about this, because you can flex to that. Now, this is more important on planes, which I'll do a separate video on, but there is something else we can do with the strop, and I do it on mortise chisels. So if I was now going to turn this into if I was going to do some heavy chopping, and I wanted to make this even more durable, I always do it with plane irons, because the back of the tool isn't a registry surface. You wouldn't want to do this with a general purpose chisel, because you need the back of your tool, you know, to register often, you know, your pairing or whatever. So you'll see why in a sec. So what I do to get even more durability, we stick it down, and a few of you have noticed me in the past doing this and asked me about it, like, and if I thought, oh, yeah, it's a bit too complicated for a comment. But like I say, pretty much all my plane irons are like this, because it's irrelevant. So instead of pulling just flat like that, I lift the handle up. And don't go bloody willy-nilly doing this, because you'll very quickly take off way too much, and you'll end up with too much of a curve. That curve doesn't matter if that's the tool's job, but that is still, you know, if we go through the full sharpening cycle again, any discrepancies we've created to the back of that tool will be eradicated, because by the time you've come down a bit with the bevel and then touch the back up on the stone, it kind of all brings it back into plane. It's very small, but it just flex up near the tip. That creates then two rounds. It's like a bulletproof edge. So that's very much worth doing if durability really is what you're after. So, but yeah, that's why, you know, chisels are tapered, because they're allocating for years of flattening as you go. Right, you know, so the chisel is going to get thinner over the years of use. But, you know, all of that, you know, you can change the dynamics of a tool so much, and it's just all on hand. You know, there's no dedicated tool needed. There's no slog at the grinder now. It's just next time I sharpen, I will repeat that exactly the same from the beginning. So I don't just tickle the tip on the fine stone like I would if I was a grinding user, like a grinder user. Instead, what I do is I go back to the coarse stone, and I start that primary bevel again, reset, work my way through. And if you can lock into that regiment, and you put the sort of hours in to build the muscle memory up, it becomes very, very efficient. So like I said, I'll do something on plane irons, because whilst it's similar, there's a bit of difference. So we'll do something similar on that. But we'll whiz through that one, because there's not much prep work to talk about. So, like I said at the beginning of this, you know, this is just a kind of, I'm just dipping my toe into showing you the fundamentals, really. So, you know, this is by no means all-encompassing. You know, if you just followed that, like, you'd get by. But there's a lot more to sharpening, you know, different tooling and whatnot. But, you know, if any of it's confusing you, the best thing to do is just bloody ask away in the comments. You know, just ask down below. And if you see a comment down there that looks, you know, like it's asking something similar, you know, just comment under theirs. And what it'll do is just buffer it all up to the top. And then that way, you know, I know where to really channel my energy and try and square it all up. So, you know, at the beginning of this, I told you that, you know, this method's a bit shite. And, you know, I want to clarify why. And it comes down to, this is really a method of its time. You know, it's dated. And And that sounds odd because a lot of you want to use hand tools and that, but there is a modern world of hand tools, and you've got things like like the Bosch tools and all the like the Lee Nielsen and Veritas and things like that, and I think something I've observed over the years of doing this is that your average amateur these days is far better equipped than I am. You've got better stuff than me, and that's just the nature of a hobby. You can't put it down. People do put it down, but it shouldn't be put down. Big part of the joy is it's building up the tools. It's the tools. It's collecting them, and it's there's something very nice about buying a nice posh new tool. Something you've earned, and that's where this goes wrong. Because if you use this method with any of those types of tools, anything with a big, thick, lump of hard and posh steel, it's just going to fall to bits instantly. Won't work. All of a sudden, you'll lose all of the efficiency because it's just too slow. It's too much hard steel to remove. And also, a lot of the benefits that I've spoken about, the durability and things like that, it's less important on tools like that because, like I say, they've got the posh steel. These steels are a lot more, abrasive resistant and things like that. They do tend to last a good deal longer. So it's not as important as it was back in the day, and you kind of also got to remember, I come from this from an apprentice, and I was very young when I started doing this, and I was taught by a great big group of geriatrics. This is how you sharpen, not like options. This is how you sharpen. So you just did as you was told. You was shown it, and you struggled like hell, like you would imagine, and you just kept at it until you got good at it. So this is once I built up on it naturally. The fundamentals are very much the sewn from the days that when I first started, and all those tools were very much the same tools as I'm using today. I mean, the jack plane that you see me always using, that was my first plane. So, and I still got it, and I still use it. It's an everyday user. So all of my tools, you'll probably notice, are of the old sort. Thin, relatively soft steel. Chisels are always thin as well. So that's quite important. So if there's if you've got modern tooling that is a core part of your workflow, I wouldn't even consider this as a method to use. It'd fall to bits instantly. But if you like your old stuff, and those are the tools you use, then this really is, it's optimized for them. And then the other part of it is I've spoken a great deal about optimizing, getting extra durability and changing the dynamics and the profiling for particular tasks. And again, if you just apply some context to that, if I'm at the bench 10 hours a day, I work 7 days a week. I don't take a day off. I've never taken a day off. I'm just always here. I'm always working. So if I can obtain 10%, 20% extra edge life, it makes a huge difference to my day. A huge difference. As well as if you get the occasional Sunday afternoon, then this isn't a skill I don't think that's worth pursuing necessarily. I think you're better off with a simplified solution that gets the job done, and then allows that limited time to be really put into the actual, the pieces you're making, joinery, the process, everything else. There's so much to learn that getting bogged down on one area when you could just use a guide. You know, it's so that's what I'd recommend. I think if you're limited on time but you still want to do it all by hand, just get yourself a guide if you're struggling, and you know, don't let people shame you for it. I don't know why people do that. There's like this almost this persona that you're not a woodworker unless you freehand sharpen, but it's irrelevant. If you get the results, it works. Right, and then on a final note, I hate doing this. We've knocked a big chunk off like all of our courses, so it might be worth having a little flick through, like, and seeing if there's out there that tickles your fancy. No, we're not going to do it for long. Like, we're just going to leave that on just while we get, you know, all this YouTube stuff back going again and just find our feet with it all. But you know, you don't have to buy out. You know, it might just be worth having a little look. So, other than that, I think I'm going to go get the kettle back on again, have another cup of tea, and then I better crack on and do something.